The comments today will center on the thing that you all gathered to talk about: money, economics, capitalism, how we drive it. And that may seem a bit unusual coming from someone who served 4 years as a Secretary of State and CIA Director. But my life was really wrapped around the things that you all do every day, even in those roles. I was reminded, you said, when I get introduced as the 70th Secretary of State, it always reminds me, like, Donald Trump was the 45th president, so there was a lot more turnover in my gig than his. And every morning I'd get up, check my phone, no tweet, all good, go to work. Don't laugh, serious stuff. Right? Four national security advisors, 5 secretaries of defense, just me. It was a unique administration because if you compare it to others, most of us had spent our life in the real world, the majority of our adult lives. I'd run these businesses in South Central Kansas. Secretary Mnuchin worked on Wall Street. Secretary Ross had been a steel guy. Most every member of the president's team understood that the real power of the United States of America didn't come from Washington, D.C. and the bureaucracy. That real power came from the American economy. And I lived that for my 4 years. Even as CI director, we spent an enormous amount of time trying to figure out, as President Trump would describe it, he'd say, Mike, I'd present him a military problem or a security issue, and he'd say, Mike, who's got the money? Who had the capacity, the wherewithal to build their military, to inflict harm on the American economy, to cease trading with our friends and allies, right? This understanding of the world's security as deeply connected to the global economy was something that we lived out. When we talked about America first, we were almost always talking about American workers and the American economy first. You can go track the work that we did. And at the forefront of everything was, how do you grow the American economy, a way to give the Secretary of State leverage, power, the capability to cut a good deal when he's in the room with our friends and with our adversaries. You could see it throughout every moment of the 4 years. Right? Think about it. My first trip to Pyongyang, which is crazy, Easter of 2018, now almost exactly 5 years ago. We make a pitch to Chairman Kim, not that we're going to destroy him with our military, not that we're going to somehow undermine him with coercive power, but we say, we can make your life better. Become a trading partner with the United States. We went to war with Vietnam, and we are now huge trading partners. They're still communists. It's all good. We couldn't convince him ultimately to give up his nuclear weapons, but our arguments were about how we could make life better for the North Korean people. It turns out that he didn't care. It turns out that Xi Jinping was largely in control of his place as well, and we couldn't convince him to get rid of those weapons. In the book I tell the story when I first meet him, his very first words to me, and I had prepared for this moment for months and months, and his very first words to me were, "So, Mr. Director, I didn't think you would show up because you've been trying to kill me." To which I responded, "Well, maybe I still am." And he laughed. By the way, that was not, of all the things my team had prepared me, that was not on the bingo card, right? And so that was completely ad hoc response. But what was so telling about that was he was definitely concerned about his security, but in the end, he knew that his lifeline depended on having access to the rest of the world and its commercial trade. And the work that we do here every day in America to be innovative, creative, to create a growing American economy was the power that I had as Secretary of State. I can't think of a meeting with a president, with a prime minister, anywhere in the world where at or near the top of their list was an American energy or American money. These were the things that mattered most to them. Indeed, as we tick through the problem sets around the world today, they are fundamentally economic. The foremost amongst them is the challenge that's currently being presented by Xi Jinping to us from the Chinese Communist Party. A challenge that's frankly been in our face for decades, and we just decided not to do a damn thing about it. I don't mean that politically. President Bush didn't do it. President Clinton didn't do it. This is not a partisan issue. For 45, 50 years, the Washington establishment's theory of the case was engage more, life will be better. Dr. Kissinger and I have had this debate. Dr. Kissinger is far smarter than I will ever be, but Dr. Kissinger is just wrong on this. Xi Jinping is not your daddy's communist leader. His intentions are deep. And these problems are primarily economic. He's engaged in economic war against the United States for 4 decades. And he built his economy on the back of the American worker. If you count the billions of dollars of intellectual property that was stolen, if you count the millions of American jobs, right? They took jobs from places like Kansas and Missouri. They took them to China, and then they dumped the product back here. They built their economy on the backs of America, and we just let it all go on. An enormous mistake, not just for America and American workers, but for the whole world. We have allowed China now to be in a place where they can pose this very risk to the fundamental way that our kids and grandkids will live their lives. That is Xi Jinping's intention. Just as importantly, this isn't a problem. I've been accused. I drove the administration's policy on China. This is something I had come to see when I was in Congress. And so I was the one who was driving to flip the way America interacted with China. You should know, I got lots of calls from my farmer friends back home in Kansas when President Trump put tariffs on. If you're out there, I got the messages. By the way, I'd get a text from one of my friends back in Kansas say, "Hey, these tariffs are killing us." And I would write back, "I'll give you the Secretary of Agriculture's phone number," right? Like, not my problem. Classic avoidance. But the truth of the matter is that that's the conflict that we're in. It's an economic conflict, and it's inside the gates. The Chinese Communist Party, this isn't about Taiwan. We've got to get Taiwan right. We should help them. We should give them the tools to defend themselves. We should continue to do the work that we did. We created something called the Quad, India, Japan, Australia, and the United States, conducting joint exercises, building our militaries alongside of each other. Biden administration's actually continued that. I think that's a great thing. But what really matters is what's happening here. I joked about Vietnam. They're still communists. They would joke with me when I come see them. They'd say, "Hey, you keep talking about that communism thing. That's us." How they wanted to operate their system inside their own country was not of great significance to us. What mattered to us was how they interacted with the world. And today Xi Jinping is interacting with America in ways that threaten us. We all saw the balloon, right? For 5 days, they floated a spy balloon across the United States of America. I was asked a couple days ago, "Hey, would that have happened if you were still Secretary of State?" And my answer is, "Hey, I'd have been the former Secretary of State." Like, no, we would have stopped the humiliation that America suffered. Forget what they collected over our most important military sites. We can all argue about what they collected. But for 5 days, the world watched the United States permit the Chinese to violate our sovereignty, as has only happened at our southern border. I promise you, our friends around the world wondered, what is going on? And our adversaries said, we know exactly what's going on. An absence of American leadership and resolve and determination and a willingness to call out what is truly evil and dangerous and take action in response to it. That's the mistake. Not what they collected, but the fact that our image in the world is further tarnished. Because in the end, the model isn't how do you stop. What will you do if Xi Jinping invades Taiwan? The answer is, how do you prevent him from doing that? And it starts here at home. We came into office, and the Chinese were operating the largest spy operation ever inside the United States. I saw it early on when I was a CIA director. We've all seen the movies, right? They're all about Russia. Everybody watch The Americans, right? This is gargantuan compared to what the Russians ever did. And they were doing it out of their diplomatic facility in Houston, Texas, of all places. They were stealing secrets from America's energy corridor, from woodlands to down to the ports in Houston, and they were stealing high-end medical information from the University of Texas medical system. And then they were expanding up and through the Midwest out of that facility. And we'd done nothing about this. And so when I finally got the chance and became Secretary of State, I told President Trump, "Hey, this is what's going on. I want to shut this down. Whatever you want to do." The entire bureaucracy opposed this. The FBI opposed it. The State Department that I was running opposed it. Even my former organization, the CIA, opposed it. You all know the reasons, right? Well, the Chinese will take a response. They'll do something. This will be really bad for our relationship. Does anybody know what the Chinese did in response? I rest my case. They sent some press releases out. They were angry, and they closed one of our consulates in China. That nothing was happening that was particularly important. We lost nothing, and we stopped their capacity to steal secrets from America. We set the program back probably 2, 3, 4, 5 years, not forever, But we also sent a strong message that we're watching and we're going to actually take real actions. No one before was prepared to do that. And so whether it's the balloon or the spy operation or the fact today that TikTok is stealing your kids' secrets, TikTok is also telling your kids that America is evil and China is good. They use it as a tool of propaganda. The fact that the Chinese, I'll say this differently. There is not a school in Kansas or Missouri that could make its budget this year if all of the Chinese money were withdrawn from it tomorrow. Not one. Chinese students, who of course pay full freight to attend our great institutions here and across America, and Chinese dollars in our research institutions all across the country. And if you think that the Chinese Communist Party is showing up to do research at the University of Rolla, right, in Missouri, or showing up at Kansas State because they like us, you're just naive. This is what we believed. They're doing it because they want to steal our stuff and steal our lunch, and they have done that. And we're going to have to figure our way through each of these things, and it's happening. The good news is business people are seeing it. There is already a massive de-encampment from China. It talks about whether we're going to decouple. It's happening. It's not going to happen because the United States government's going to say so. It's going to happen because business people are going to see there's just way too much risk there. I'll give you one good example. We suffered from this virus that traveled the world for years. Don't let anybody gaslight you. It came from the lab. March of 2020, I went on TV and said it came from the lab, and literally within minutes was called a racist. Your own NIH, the National Institute of Health, led by Dr. Fauci, immediately came out and said, not true, don't know what the secretary was talking about. Everybody knew. We all knew exactly. I'd seen the information. There was not a shred of information suggesting this came from a wet market, that some bat flew in from 600 miles away. None. And yet the narrative on CNN and around the world was the Trump team's nuts. We understood this challenge from China and how it impacts us. We could come to see that this virus had come from a place and a decision was made intentionally to send it around the world. And so while it leaked from the lab accidentally, its spread was deeply intentional. And it wasn't but a month later, I had 14 diplomats in Wuhan, and they needed to get them out. It took us 4 days to convince the Chinese government to allow us to fly an airplane in to get our own officials out of there. And we ultimately had to tell them, we are going to fly in whether you give us permission or not. Just we're going to have to decide how many F-35s are going to fly in alongside of our airplane. And they ultimately relented. 2 weeks later, we were trying to get PPE home. And they wouldn't let us fly an American airplane to pick up product made by an American company inside of China under contract with an American customer, and they wouldn't let the stuff out of their country. I think the whole world can see you don't really own anything in China. People tell me, Mike, I have this beautiful factory in China. I always remind them, you don't own a thing. You're a squatter. The chance of you enforcing that agreement for your property rights is exactly zero if the Chinese government decides they don't want you there any longer. You aren't valued by the Chinese Communist Party. You're just next. And the world is coming to recognize this, and we will eventually convince the leadership in China that they have to change their ways. And when we do, our kids and grandkids will get to live in a great America. And if we don't, if we back away or we are fearful, then the world will look a lot more like their world. A ginormous, is that a word? A ginormous surveillance state led by an authoritarian who drives every country in the world to be a vassal state of his. That's his mission, that's his intention. He has 1.4 billion people, the first or second largest economy in the world, and the ability to do it. We began to push back. We did the same thing in other places. We were confronted with an Iran that was on the rise. The United States had signed this crazy nuclear deal. We ripped it up. And we tried to get deterrence back. They were trying to undermine the American economy in ways that I can't share fully with you, but were incredibly real. And so we knew we needed to restore deterrence. It took us 2.5 years, and ultimately we got this chance. We ended up taking a strike against General Soleimani. Why does that matter? 2 things you should know. One, America had known that Soleimani had killed 500 Americans for years and years and years, and had known that he was putting product into the American value chain that was defective and dangerous and intentional. And yet we continued to allow it to happen because he was probably the second most important person in Iran, and your establishment, State Department, said that this would cause World War III. If you take out General Soleimani, World War III will ensue. So we began to work. I first at CIA, along with a great partner, my friend Yossi Cohen, the former director of Mossad, Israeli intelligence service. He and I began to build out both kinetic models and economic models to put pressure on Iran. But we didn't get all the way home until we took the strike. When Soleimani was traveling from Beirut to Damascus to Baghdad on commercial airplanes, we were able to stop him from another plot against America. We took him out. He didn't kill another American, and importantly, we didn't cause World War III either. We had it right. But what we did cause was the whole world to take notice, right? They took notice that this administration was different. I campaigned really hard for Marco Rubio. I love Senator Rubio. President Trump, by the way, would remind me with great frequency, oh, yeah, whenever I would disagree, he'd go, yeah, you're the Rubio guy. He would also remind me how many electoral votes I got from time to time, which was 0. I don't think President Rubio would have taken that strike. I think he would have had a very different team and a very different risk tolerance. We were prepared to do the things that were going to protect our economy and our people every day. And when we took the strike on Soleimani, Xi Jinping noticed in China. The Ayatollah certainly noticed in Iran. Vladimir Putin noticed too. And Chairman Kim in North Korea, right? They all could see that, like, hey, they fired a missile at a moving vehicle at an international airport and struck their target within 4 inches of its intended location, killing nobody they didn't intend to kill. People take note of these things. And we had peace. They didn't fire another artillery round at your embassy in Baghdad the entire time I was Secretary of State following that moment. We understood the deterrence model and the power of the American economy. Last thought, and then I'll take questions. We're in a different place today. The American economy struggled through the years of the virus, now trying to find its grounding, its footing again. It's doing so in the face of an administration that is reversing nearly all of the regulatory relief that we provided in the Trump administration. I didn't have a thing to do with this. This was the rest of the team. But one should never forget the enormous cost that's imposed. When you think about ESG and you think about driving American energy literally back into the ground, and you say, how are we going to convince Vladimir Putin to stop in Ukraine? It is not possible to do those things at the same time. There is a one-to-one correlation. When we were in office, there was a reason crude oil was less expensive. We shut down all Iranian oil, 3 million barrels a day of oil. Again, economics. 3 million barrels a day of oil shut off from the global marketplace out of 100. So think 3% of the global market in a very tight market. And they said oil prices would go to 110, 120, 130. They never did. By the way, they did go to minus 30 for about 4 hours, which was a painful day and a half with the Mexican government. But we now today find ourselves in this place where our security is at risk because our economy now has decided that diversity, equity, inclusion matters more than the bottom line. That the central thesis that says we're going to decarbonize America in 2 years, 4 years, or 6 years is insane. There's no math there, right? When you forget that the economy provides the grounding for our security, then you put American lives at risk. And we never forgot that, and we delivered good outcomes. And while we did not get it right every day by any stretch of the imagination, in the book I talk about our failures just as much as I do the things we got right. It's important to remember that we had serious people that were thinking about each of you and your families and your schools and your grandkids every day.